Curtis A reached out to me, said make a theme song for my show. Said alright, just give me all the details, man. And my homie says he don't know. Well, if you're gonna pay me big bucks, cause I might should have something to say. He said, you know what I bring, I'm the customizing king, nothing else matters anyway. So is he gonna have guests? I don't know. Is he gonna go live? I don't know. What time will it be? What will you see? I'm pretty much in the dark, but I can guarantee he'll be customizing action figures, getting paint all on his fingers. It's art by Akerman. It's art by Akerman. Tips and tricks and conversation, sharing his gift with every nation. It's art by Akerman. Art by Akerman. You best get ready, cause now it's time for Art by Akerman.
Welcome back, folks. It's another episode of Art by Akerman, and we're going to talk about the sizes of Legions figures. And I say we because I've brought a very special guest with me. If you follow the other channels and stuff that I'm on, you probably know this guy. It is my host with the most, the co-host partner on Shooting the Shelf, Jesse Arnold. How's it going, Jesse?
Oh, wait. Sorry, wrong disguise. I'm good. How are you, Curtis?
It's going excellent. I was talking with our good buddy Len today, and obviously he just sells a lot of custom parts. There's always new folks jumping into the custom game and stuff. And one of the questions that comes up quite often for him is just like, what are the various sizes of these things? And so I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that and show a few examples and kind of go through this. So I appreciate you jumping on with me.
Absolutely. I love talking about the various scales and body types of the Legion figures, so I'm happy to join in.
Yeah, it's a very fun line in the fact that there's just all that different size variety. So it gives your shelves like this just really cool look to it. It's not like some of these toy lines that everything's just, straight across the board.
Sure.
So what we're going to do, I'm going to start with the smallest, and we're going to work our way up. And if I miss anything, correct me, Jesse. Feel free to jump in, let me know, because there's some standard sizes or names of sizes that we have, but then within that there's some variants. So just kind of first talking about that, you've got your 1.0, which you'll hear the term often, which is typically like your standard knight or regular figure like an orc or a barbarian or anything like that. Those are your standard 1.0s, but there's some variants within 1.0. And then 2.0 came out a few years later, which was to introduce like the female body and more of the slim, like elves and things like that. But within 2.0, you've got like some goblin scale, you've got some different things. You got females, you got males. So there's some stuff within there. Then we got, I believe next was ogre scale, right? Yeah.
Just to point out real quick, in the 1.0, there's also the dwarf scale.
That's true. Yep. Dwarf scale as well in 1.0. Then we got ogre scale, which is about 9 inches, give or take, but there's some variance there. We got trolls, which are 12 inches. And then in the last few years, we've got a new one called brute scale, which is kind of in between 1.0 and the ogre. But like I said, we've got some varying things. So we actually I've got 13 figures to show. Jesse's got one that I don't have. I'm sure he probably has these, but he's got the one that I don't have. And we're just going to, so basically 14 different sizes that we're going to show you through here. So, and the first one is a little bit cheating, because the first one is a gnome, which is not an actual size, within the Legion's world, but it is a size that you can come up with Legion's parts and 3D parts. So let me kind of embiggen myself a little bit here. So this is a gnome custom that I did. And this is using a regular Goblin Legion builder. But what you do with the gnome kits, so when you buy a gnome kit from Wolf King Customs, you get these feet. You typically get a set of hands, you get a head if you buy a whole set, or you can buy those parts individually. And so like normally the Goblin leg, where the ankle is here, that would be the knee. and there would still be a little bit more leg. So you basically kind of cut off that shin part and plug the foot in where the knee goes. And then same thing with there's like a gauntlet here normally, and then a hand, and you just kind of plug the hand where the gauntlet goes. So it shortens the arms, shortens the legs, and makes it more of this kind of gnome scale. Now, the reason I wanted to show this was because you can make this as a custom. There's gnome kits out there and stuff, but also it has been confirmed that within Mythos, there are gnomes in Mythos. So we hopefully will be getting something like this. We don't know what it's actually going to look like. It could be smaller, could be slightly bigger. We don't know. But I wanted to show this because this is something that, you can make and something that you may get here in the very near future. So any thoughts on the gnome size, Jesse, before we move on?
No, I think you pretty much summed it all up there. And you could get slightly different sizes in your gnomes depending on which thighs you used. So you can we can get into that when we get into the 2.0s. But you could have like the taller human elf thigh or the smaller goblin thigh, and so you could even have a little variation on your gnomes too.
For sure. So slightly up from this is using kind of, like I said, this used a goblin body, and this also uses a goblin body without losing the shins and stuff. This is a fuzz monk, so you can kind of see the size difference here between these two. And this is Thistlethorn, which Jesse is very familiar with, right?
Yes. You just not get him worked into your shelf yet, or
no. I pulled all these directly from my display. I wanted to kind of get some variety in races and everything, as well as the size. So, so he's using standard like goblin-esque parts. So if you buy like a Goblin Legion builder or something, a lot of this stuff is going to be the same, or at least the same size. Some of the leg parts and stuff are more elvish in terms of how they look. But yeah, this is, a lot of your 2.0 goblins are going to look like this. So this is technically a 2.0 body, but you're going to see as we go a little bit further that there are other 2.0s that are quite a bit taller than this. So
and between the fuzz monks, the goblins, and other things of that size, like those use the shorter thighs that we were just talking about on the gnome, and they come in a variety of different styles of the forearms and shins and different things to convey heroic good, or maybe more of a class role feature kind of a thing. But and the goblin torso has that little bit of a kick forward on the neck, the way it's angled.
Yeah.
Sorry, I might be, if I'm going too deep, tell me to.
No, you're fine. You're fine. And typically what you can do is you can mix and match parts amongst 2.0, amongst 1.0, so on and so forth. But you can also go in between sizes with some of the things. So there are some like 1.0 characters that'll use like a 2.0 pauldron, or vice versa. There's some, I think Swig is a 2.0 body, but he's got a 1.0 head. So he's got like a converted neck peg that goes from 2.0 to 1.0. So there is some mixing of those two, but as far as like normal, swapping and stuff, you can swap this with anything else that would have like 2.0 type parts. So,
yep.
So there's that one, and I'll keep him out. Let me put the gnome to the side, because the next thing we're going to talk about is dwarf scale. But I didn't bring a dwarf. I brought a goat. So now you can see here a little bit taller still than the goblin. And this one was 2.0, but these are using 1.0 parts. So kind of what Jesse was talking about earlier, like this is, their standard figures that they came out with first, the first wave that had a bunch of like skeletons and knights and barbarians and stuff, had these 1.0 parts, and so they fit. And when we're talking about those 1.0, 2.0, whatever, a lot of it is just talking about the connection, the joint. So like when the arms plug into the torso, that's a 1.0 connection. But they do have the shorter legs. So this isn't like if you were to grab like a knight or barbarian, it would have longer shins and a little bit longer typically, like the gauntlets, the bracers, so that the legs would be a little bit longer and the arms would be a little bit longer. But yeah, this is kind of your standard dwarf size, but once again, using 1.0 parts. So you could still mix this with other 1.0s.
Yeah, sorry, I was fiddling with parts
No,
because
you're fine.
I had a dwarf broken apart right here just so people could see maybe a little more of
Awesome.
a breakdown.
Yeah.
So and instead of so you're talking about the 1.0, that's the connection, the overall scale. So these are your mix of bare legs and 1.0, all 1.0 scale,
Mhm.
which is talking about like the ports size and like the attachment sizes. And then, which I know we're getting to these, but just because I have them
Mhm.
there. And then there's the dwarf, just so people can see the height difference. So it's a slightly smaller shin, slightly smaller upper leg, thigh, and then the 1.0, but they're both 1.0. So I could put the dwarf torso, any 1.0 torso will work on the dwarf body. It's the same ball joint.
Yeah, and just if you could hold those up for just a second, within
Yeah,
those
sure.
legs, like you could swap out if you wanted to take the dwarf legs and put them on that crotch piece for the barbarian, you could do that. If you wanted to take the lower legs from the dwarf and put it on to the 1.0 bearer legs, you could do that as well. Now you're going to create some different scaling, but those are all parts that are able to be swapped. So
Yep. Yeah. So if you want to have a slightly taller or a slightly shorter human, give it the upper dwarf thighs. If you want to have a slightly taller dwarf, give them the up thighs, like the ones, and it'll still give you more variety on your lineup.
for sure, for sure. Let's see. Let me embiggen myself again. So we had last one we talked about was the dwarf size, and now we're going to go to a 2.0 female. And so you can see kind of the height difference here. So the 2.0 is going to be almost the exact same size as a 1.0. There's not a whole lot of difference in terms of the standard 1.0, but there is a difference in terms of the dwarf size. So you can see here, just kind of about a head above the dwarf size. And this one is a female, but there's also 2.0 like elves, vampires, some more of the slender builds are on this 2.0 frame. Move some of the fur out of the way so you can kind of see what's going on here. But this more slender frame than the 1.0, which is a little bit thicker connection.
Yep. Yep. And other ones in the 2.0, like the full height size would be your, like the two wizards, Arazak and why am I blanking on his name?
I am
Samir.
too. Samir, yep.
They're 2.0 bodies, but they have like the more generic, not as defined as female torso.
Yep.
And different parts. The Father Christmas figures have a 1.0 body underneath there, which would be about the same height as her, just depending on the headpiece you put on it.
And if we went back to that fuzz monk from earlier, the thistlethorn, that's the same connection parts as this. So if we wanted to take some of the parts from this and swap it with that, those would all be interchangeable. So
yep. Can Frankenstein them up is almost infinitely.
Hey, don't let's hold off on the Frankenstein. We haven't got to that guy yet. All right. So next, we're talking about 2.0 female here. Now we're going to go to a 1.0 male, which you can see height wise, they're about the same. Like there's not a major difference in height, but definitely bulkier arms, torso, legs. And like we were showing earlier with the dwarf, all of these parts would be interchangeable with like that dwarf build. But this is your more kind of standard build. And I would say, I haven't looked at numbers or anything, but I would say that a good probably 50% of the line, if I had to guess, is this type of build, the 1.0 build. I don't know. You think I'm pretty off on that, or does that sound about right to you?
I don't want to say you're wrong or right. I mean, it's definitely a large chunk of it's probably the biggest percentage of the line, I would say.
Gotcha.
Being in that size.
It's a very popular scale for the line. So there's, there is a lot of variety, and I think folks like the variety. But if there's the most popular size, this is probably it. So
yeah, that's essentially the original scale figure they started off with. They just in that first wave, that's why they call them the 1.0, is because they were everything in that first wave from the first Kickstarter could swap between the pieces.
Yeah.
and you had the full size figures, which clock in right around 7 inches, again, depending on what head attachment you have on there.
Mhm.
And then the dwarves, which I want to say come in around 5.5. I don't have one right in front of me to measure, but
Yeah, that's probably about right. So
yeah.
So that's your
And
standard 1.0. Yep.
real quick, we've seen improvements on that 1.0 buck with the Valiant Knight
Mhm.
and the stuff that's going to be coming within the new, depending on when this airs, the Necronominus wave. So you'll have slightly slimmer bodies too. They're not as skinny as the 2.0, but you've got your Magnus there that's got that really robust, burly, chest piece torso.
Mhm.
Whereas you get the some of the other ones, so you'll even have different looks within the 1.0 as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And with their new rise of the beast wave, they've actually have some with double articulation and stuff like that. So, there's even more stuff to come that we're not even going to cover today, but we're going to cover what's out currently. So
Well, I
there's
only said it because the Valiant Knight was out.
yeah. That's what I'm no, you're good with that. I'm just saying in addition to the Valiant Knight, there's
the
even
new
more stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, there's the Knoll. I mean, I don't even know. Like, that's crazy. And then you got the Leodicius. Yeah, there's some crazy stuff coming. But this is what I think a lot of folks love about this line is there is so much variety. It's not all just standard same thing. So but this is 1.0, and I'm going to show you another 1.0, but there's quite a bit of variance here. So you can see, this is a Sphexian from the Cosmic Legion. This is Sphexian Minor. And even though these are both 1.0, it stands quite a bit taller than the Magnus. Now, most of the reason is it's got longer legs, it's got longer arms, it's got a longer torso, but all the connections are the same size. So if I wanted to pop the Magnus torso on that guy, I definitely could. If I wanted to put the arms from Magnus on this guy, I could. All the connection points are the same, but within that body, it's just elongated and just kind of stretched out. So,
and the Sphexians do have a different hip piece. The joints, everything will work the same, but it is slightly wider to accommodate the abdomen or the thorax or whatever that bit is on the back with the stinger, and the front, like the loin piece in the front. They're a little wider, but you can swap them. They will still work. It'll just give your guy a little bit more of a cowboy stride than the
yeah. And I'll actually show this figure. This was one of the Legion's Con exclusives this year, and he had some of the longer limbs, so you can see where he's got like this. Even though he's not a Sphexian, he doesn't have the wings, he doesn't have the big, tail and stuff. He still has that elongated look, which it just kind of looks really neat on him. I'm not sure what you would call that, but he just has very long limbs. So
yeah.
So yeah, that's using the exclusive arms that came with that set. So if you want that, you got to get the exclusive set. Just FYI, but. So we'll keep this up, and then next we're going to show the brute scale, and this is Canox Vol, and not a ton of difference here. On the next few, they're going to be pretty close in terms of size, but there is enough of a size difference that I wanted to bring it up. Plus, this is a completely different scale. So this is brute scale. Now, a lot of the brute scale stuff will interchange with 1.0. But it's not the exact same. I don't know how better to describe that, Jesse. You got any other thoughts on that?
No, I mean it's built on the 1.0 port system, like the attachments, the pegs, the holes, they're all the same size roughly. I mean, some of them might have a little bit more give than others, but depending on which run, some of the 1.0, the torsos might have a slightly looser ball socket, which is not looser, but a little more give. But they, you could take and put that Magnus, that gold torso you had, on him, and the arms and everything would still function and work. Now, some of the special collar pieces and stuff might vary when it gets very character specific, but it would still sit on there to an extent.
And
You put
you
those
might get
arms.
I was just gonna say you might get some weird might get some weird proportion looks too, like when you put like these size arms in like that but that may be what you're going for. If you're going for a specific custom where you want that figure to have just massive arms, maybe that's something that you want, is to mix the brute scale parts with the 1.0. So
yeah, say you want to make a more like a gorilla-esque dwarf. You take your dwarf legs 1.0. So this is the same 1.0 size
like
as
Magnus,
that Magnus, but it's, you know, bear skin. You know, I don't have my air heat gun here. Pop it on your dwarf legs, and then you put in some brute scale arms. Now this is going to look a little weird, but you know, you get like a little bit of a longer arm.
Oh yeah.
Now he doesn't have his pauldron and stuff on there, but you throw a pauldron on there, and that's going to hide some of that discrepancy. Yeah. Or you put some soft goods or something, and you get a little bit more of a brute-ish looking, not, no pun intended for the brute scale, but you know,
I got you.
Or you put those arms, you put that on a goblin with that big kind of chonky helmet, and you get like a really kind of more primal looking.
I'm thinking like guy. What was the guy's name from Umbrella Academy?
The
leader,
Luther.
Yeah, Luther. Yeah. Like I like him. Like if you were to create something like that, you just wanted this like massively, you know, big armed, maybe even big torsoed guy on like a regular size legs. Like you could create some really neat proportions with this stuff.
So I mean, you could just put the brute scale torso right on the legs, but if you wanted to make it look a little more awkward, like intentionally, you know, just to throw up those proportions, you could.
Yeah, definitely. So next one I got, it's going to be a little weird because we went 1.0, we went to brute scale, and now we're going back to 1.0, but this is kind of a special one. And this is Frankenstein's creature. So this is taller than the brute scale, just the way that he stands, but a lot of it is just, even though it's 1.0 parts, he's very elongated, kind of like we were talking about with the Sphaxium, but even more so. He's got these really big feet as far as just the platform shoes and stuff, but he's also got long legs, long arms. He is just very stretched out. And so when you put him next to a brute scale, even though he's the 1.0 joints and he's not near as bulky as the brute scale, like his arms compared to the brute scale arms are quite a bit bigger in terms of bulk, but he's taller. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Now, this is the only one that we have with this kind of elongated 1.0 right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see some more of this. So
sure. Just real quick so people can see, hold up your Magnus with him.
Yeah.
If he's still available.
Yep. So there's those two next to each other.
You could swap some of those parts out. Now, again, you're going to get weird proportions and stuff, but if that's what you're going for, those parts should all swap fairly consistently between those two figures.
Yeah. So like if you know, once again, you wanted some really long arms on the Magnus, you could take these arms and pop them in there. Or if you wanted shorter arms on the Frankenstein's creature, you could do that. So there's a lot of swappability options, and depending on like what things that you want to swap and what scale items you want to swap with what other scale items, you can just create some really unique looks. So, all right, let me put the brute scale back. All right, so now we're talking Frankenstein's creature, and something that's the same height, like pretty much identical. I gave it the slight edge on Frankenstein's creature, but quite a bit different part sizes that you will not be swapping with anything right now is Slog. So these two, I put them I was trying to see which one is closer because I'm trying to go in order, and I put them back to back and put a piece of paper across it, and Slog was just, I mean, ever so slightly taller. But you can see this is a chunky boy, and there is nothing on this currently that is really swappable with any other part without major customization. I mean, obviously, as
hose,
customizers,
maybe.
yeah. I mean, as customizers, you start getting into like Dremels and green stuff and all kinds of stuff, maybe you can do something, but otherwise, like, this is not going to really swap with a 1.0, 2.0, or any of that kind of stuff. This guy's his own thing right now until we see something else like him. So any other thoughts on that?
I was hoping you had him on your roster. I knew you probably would. Just yeah.
He's
still
he's a big boy. They affectionately call him the meatball. So
yeah. He is dense.
So next, which is a 2.0. I mean, we're going all the way back to 2.0. I'm pretty sure this is 2.0, right? The grays, they're 2.0, yes. Right? Yeah. So he's taller than Slog. He's taller than Brute Scale. He's taller than Frankenstein's creature, and the 1.0s. But he's a 2.0 scale, so he is kind of like on that same build as the Thistlethorn Fuzz Monk that we saw at the beginning. The female body parts, like if you got elves and the skinny vampires and stuff, like he's got the same ports as them. But when we talk about elongated, I mean, holy cow! Like this guy's the elongated master. Very stretchy. So mixing and matching parts, like let's say that you wanted to make a Mr. Fantastic tribute, right? I mean, you take this long bare arm and you throw it on like a regular 2.0 body, and you've got like one really long arm now. Like there's things that you could do with this for sure to kind of work with the proportions and everything. So
yeah, he's really fun if you want to get, as the Greyborn as they are in Cosmics, or if you mix them in with your Mythics, you put some custom heads on there, you can get some different races, different looking things. And yeah, this is a real fun body to play with, especially if you put like the little goblin legs on him. So you got those really short legs with those long arms. So again, you get that more like animal looking stance to him.
One thing to note on the 2.0s versus the 1.0s is that a lot of them also have this mid cut. So like on the 1.0s, let me just get Magnus back out. Like this torso is all one solid piece. Okay. So from the waist up to the neck is all one solid piece. But when you look at like the female here, so like underneath her armored bra, like that's one piece from her neck down to the armor, and then her like abdomen is a separate piece. Same thing with this gray. So his upper part is one piece, and then there's a connection point here, and then the lower piece, and then you go down into the waist. So it gives you a little bit more articulation. Now there are some 1.0 figures that are slated to come out with that abdomen cut, but as of right now, the 2.0s is kind of where you're at for that. So,
and if you wanted to, you have to be careful and follow your safety procedures, with the hot water or the heat gun. You can separate those torsos at that middle joint. So if you wanted to put the gray's lower, abs on, say, like the goblin metallic torso, like the upper part, like from the chest up, you can swap those things around. Or some people have been taking like the abdomen torso part of Artemis, the female elf, and putting it on like the Ghost of Christmas Past. I saw someone just did a really cool, like kind of like tavern server where she's got like almost like the corset.
Oh yeah.
Two pieces and stuff.
Yeah,
so
because it's like that really leather with the ties and stuff in it. Yeah. So like, let's say you didn't like this look. Like initially, this was not my favorite figure because I was just like, you're fairly naked besides like an armored bra. Like that's not, whatever. So let's say you didn't want that and you wanted more of kind of an armored abdomen here. You could take something like this, like the lower piece of this, and you could pop that on there and now make her abdomen armored. Now, because this is a goblin and that's a smaller part, it's going to change the proportions a bit. But there's also other characters. Like I said, there's elves and vampires and things like that are also 2.0 that you can change out that middle piece. But it's an extra kind of articulation piece that's not on the 1.0s that gives you a little bit more variety. So which is good because if we're being honest, 2.0 doesn't have as much variety as 1.0 in terms of just overall library of parts.
Yet.
Yeah.
There is a lot of good. There's a lot more good 2.0 stuff coming out, especially in the Rising Suns wave. When that hits, there's a lot of cool new 2.0 parts in there.
Yep.
And just real quick, since we're talking about it, pay attention and try to. This is just a little nitpicky thing, just to help. Sometimes people will say version 2 or 2.0, and they'll interchange the version 2 for a version 2 is say a character that came out in that first wave and they've made another version with new parts. That's a version 2. Sometimes, especially folks at the studio aren't as, and I mean, it's their toy line, they can say what they want, but they'll say a version 2 when they mean, or they'll say a 2.0 as in like your software. This is the 2.0, this is the updated figure. It does work, but if someone's saying 2.0 and they're talking about size, just it's easy to get confused if you're not aware of that, is all I was trying to say.
Yeah, and I think part of what we wanted to get across today is just because you hear 1.0 or 2.0 or brute scale or whatever doesn't mean that that's the only thing it can swap with. Now, it's going to be the easiest thing for it to swap with. Like swapping a 2.0 with another 2.0 is going to be the easiest. Same thing with 1.0 and so on and so forth. But there's a lot of things that you could do to mix and match parts, get different proportions and things like that. So next one I'm going to show you, though, I don't think you could mix these two. So this was the gray that we were just looking at, right, with the elongated parts, and then you've got an ogre scale. Okay, now height wise, the ogre scale is just slightly taller than the gray, but you could not I don't think in any really good way like take the arm off of an ogre and put it on a gray. I don't even know that like you would, even with a Dremel, I don't know that there's enough torso space here to drill a hole big enough to fit that arm. But yeah, this is a chunky boy. So like, not only is he just slightly taller, but he's just big. He's bigger, wider, muscular, just huge guy. Now, within this ogre scale, it's been fairly limited until just recently, to where it was just a lot of bare arms, a lot of bare legs. They all have pretty much the same feet, unless they've got hooves, or if they've got bare feet. But like if they've got armored feet, it's all this spiky armor. So there's a lot of very similar parts. So there's not as many pop and swap options. But recently we've started to get some other ones in Cosmic as well as Mythic, and we got some armored stuff that's getting ready to come out with Necronominus, with the Sir Uxak, and then the Berdak figure that's going to finally give us like a fully armored ogre and allow for a little bit more of the part swapping. So
yeah, these I think the ogres are a lot of fun. They're the kind of figures that feel like He-Man felt in my hand as a kid with the Mythic line. They've just got that big presence when you pick them up, and they're a lot of fun, and they're a lot of fun to customize.
Yeah, they're chunky boys. I mean, a lot of what you're going to probably do on this would be like, if you get a Legion Builder one, is touch up some of these accents and then, maybe paint a new head for it. You're probably not going to do a whole lot of like part swapping, but there's still customizing you can definitely do within this.
Sure. I will say these ones, one of the cool things about the ogres is they were the first ones that had the bare forearms, if I remember correctly, because you take their hands off and those gauntlets will slide off, and they have different ones that are like more like a wrist brace or a cuff instead of that big thing. So, or you could take it off completely and just have that whole bare exposed arm if you wanted. Which I think is really cool.
Kind of similar. This brute scale is fairly new, and on this leg, you can pull that foot out, and this wrap part will slide off of here over the leg. So there's some things like that have come out recently. So as the line grows and they do new things, even though they're using kind of the same port system, you do get some cool upgrades. So
totally.
So there's that one. And then the next one we're going to go to is also ogre scale, but I felt like I should bring it up because it is, quite a bit bigger. And I just think it should be noted. So this is Arag Gore, and then this is kind of your standard ogre. So standing side by side, the Arag Gore is about half a head taller than the ogre, and even like if you just don't, like the head's bigger, obviously, like his head is massive, but even if you just kind of look where the neck and shoulders stop, like the shoulders on this are just way higher than what it is on the ogre. So and yeah, this is just a huge chunky boy, but these kind of figures have now offered us some new parts to mix with, like this guy. Like if I wanted to take the pauldrons off of this Arag Gore, or the bracers off of this Arag Gore and put them on this guy and switch them around, I can definitely do that. So
I've got that with a scourge right here.
Yeah, let me embiggen you
with the more barbarian. So he's got the barbarian cuff that we were just talking about on there, and the spiked legs. So yeah, he's got that ogre armor instead of the more smooth armor that he came with.
Well, and I like that also because like you've got the like the torso and stuff off of the torso armor off of there, which makes him look more kind of lizard like, as opposed to like the Arag Gore, where like he's got like the pauldrons and the chest plate and stuff, like he looks like an armored dragonborn, whereas yours looks more kind of monsterish, like a creature. So
yes, yeah.
So there's
just
some simple changes you can make.
Now the heads won't swap between these and the ogres or the half giants. At least
the neck goes forward
because of the articulate or the structure, like the skeletal structure that would be in this creature. It is part of why that you were talking about how the shoulders sit higher, and then this whole upper neck piece is one connected piece to the torso. So I mean the ball might fit, but the way it sits would not be anatomically accurate.
Gotcha. The next one after Arag Gore, which I don't have, and full disclosure, it's because I really don't like these things, but that's okay. Some people do. The next one would be the the Centaur, which is what Jesse's going to show. So
yeah, I just had to show how weird that looked. Yeah, this is the only Centaur that is currently out. This is Apharius. I don't have his pauldrons on him, but there he is. From flat hoof on the table to the top of his head, clocks in like right at 10 inches. So he's almost the same height as Arag Gore, but I'd say just maybe a little bit higher with the horns on his headpiece and stuff. But it is your standard horse. It's not standard, but it's the horse body with kind of that more flared, and it could be any horse body. The horse bodies are all the same size currently.
Yeah.
But the thing that's different is they have this special adapter that goes where the neck would that allows it to accept. Technically, this was the first one to come out with brute scale parts, but it was not a full brute scale figure. So it's got that adapter. So this is the same torso as Canog's Vol and Tharnog, which I think are the only other two. Oh, and Kalazir, the Jinn.
And Kalazir, yep.
I think are the only brutes we have that are currently out. But yeah, so it's you can, and if you wanted to, you could.
He's one we talked about kind of the mixing brute and 1.0 when he first came out, because people were so excited about getting brute scale in hand. There was a lot of folks that actually took that upper torso and head and then put it on like a 1.0 lower body, which did give it that proportion of having just a real, like somebody that like skipped leg day, I guess, and just like really went heavy on the chest and arms and stuff, to kind of create some cool looks. So
now I will show, just since we're talking about it, I do have a female Centaur in the works. So this is the Phobos horse from Alithia with a Bardric, or maybe it was a Waltor the Mad Mythic version chest with, or torso with a plate, but that's a 1.0 body on that ball socket. So again, showing that the brute scale sockets with 1.0 you could put a 1.0 body on there if you.
When he's talking about the plate on there, the chest on some of the newer ones, the front actually will pop off. And so then you can pop a new chest plate on it. And some 3D parts manufacturers have started to come out with replacement chest plates. And so what he's done there is he's taken what is, typically a male torso, and he popped the chest plate off. And then he bought a female chest plate from a 3D printed part company. I'm guessing that's a Mythic Bits one. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then has popped it on the front. And so because of the change in some of the body parts and things like that, it's just allowed for more customization, more input from the 3D parts community, which has now given him this option to kind of take that larger size frame and make it into a female.
Yeah. Or if you wanted to make a male centaur with an armored torso, you could use that Magnus torso you were showing earlier, the gold. So it's one of these type of plates. So this front section, it's stuck in there too good. I can't pry it out.
Gotcha.
But it pops out, and there's a little square receptacle in there, rectangular receptacle that the plastic ports into, and that's where the 3D printers have made the attachments.
And for anybody that's kind of viewing this or listening to this that's just gotten into Legions, if this feels like you're drinking from a fire hose, trust me, I understand. There's stuff like this all the time where I'm like, is this going to work with that, or would that work with this, or what would that look like together? So if you have any comments or questions, throw them in the comment section. We'll try to answer them definitely, or reach out to myself or Jesse, and we'll be glad to try to help you, because this stuff can be confusing. But I think the biggest thing is that there's just a plethora of different sizes and parts and combinations, and you can mix and match and try a bunch of different stuff and create some unique proportions and just come up with some really cool creations with this, because they're not all just the standard size pieces. So
yeah, and I think that's half the fun is, if you have a bunch of different parts, if you just take a bunch of, if you get some figures, you get a couple 2.0s, you get a couple 1.0s, brute, whatever. If you're in the mood, take them apart and then just see what fits, see what doesn't. And, that's the best way to, that's a big way Curtis and I learned a lot of this. We saw comments and stuff in the Cabal or different platforms where you could see things, but like getting them in hand and playing with them yourselves are the best way to figure it out.
Well, and the other thing I would say is that if you ever get a chance to buy the Legions Con 2-packs, the exclusive 2-packs, now they do sell them in individual ones afterwards, but typically the ones that you get from Legions Con directly have a whole bunch of extra parts. It typically will have some extra heads, some extra arms, some extra legs. And because it's a 2-pack, you've just got immediate swap options right there. And so when you do that kind of stuff, or if you buy something like the Fisher Rice is a good example that just came out, the Shadow Circle from Cosmic Legion. He comes with 2 extra sets of arms and 2 extra sets of, well, not extra. It comes with 2 sets of arms, 2 sets of legs. He's got 4 heads. He's got 3 neck pegs. So when you get something like that and you come up with whatever it is, the format that you want to put it in your display, now all of a sudden you've got this group of extra parts that's just like a pile of parts, right? And you start getting a few of those, like you get some from the Legions compacts, you get the Fisher Rice, you get maybe a deluxe barbarian builder from the OG barbarian, and you start getting all these extra parts from these figures that you've made, and then you're like, okay, what can I do with all these parts? And you start just playing with them, and you start mixing and matching, and it's kind of like Lego, you just start like building things, and you're like, oh wow, this is kind of cool. So it's a lot of it is just experimentation. But the next thing I wanted to show you, because we still got a couple more left. So we've got let me embiggen myself again. Hold on one second. Okay. So last one I showed was Arag Gore, and then Jesse showed the Centaur, which is probably about the same, maybe just slightly taller than Arag Gore. And then the other one we got is a troll size. So let me just pull it back towards me so you kind of see a better look. So there's kind of your size difference between, kind of one of your bigger ogres and then your troll size. And with trolls, you're extremely limited in terms of swappability. Like you're not going to swap really any of the parts of this versus like a 1.0 or 2.0 or that kind of thing. You can definitely do a full repaint. You could do, there's 3D parts companies that make different heads or different attachments, hands, feet, whatever. Perry in our community, Perry Morrell Jr. does a lot with ogres. Like he just does some crazy things. Brian C does a lot of like printed parts and stuff that attach to trolls. He's done some crazy things as well. So there's definitely some stuff you can do with trolls, but you're not going to have that, what we were just talking about, where you got like a pile of parts and you're just mixing and matching to see what works. That's really not going to work with a troll. But these guys are a ton of fun. And when Jesse was talking about like holding an ogre in your hand, and it kind of feels like when you're a kid and you're holding like a He-Man character or something, that's kind of like this thing. This is like if you remember My Buddy, like my buddy, like you could just carry this thing around with you. You could, this is like a chunky boy, and he is just, they're fun. This is my favorite troll. There's 4 different trolls out technically, but then there's different versions of those. So like some of them have alternate heads. So there's like, I think 8 total, but this is my favorite one. I love the ice troll. He looks so great, especially when you get some snow outside, take him outside, get some pictures. But yeah, this stands pretty much right at about 12 inches tall. Big chunky boy. So
yeah. The trolls are great. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about people making crazy stuff. Curtis made a I don't know if you've shown it on any of your episodes yet, but go find it somewhere.
I did on my Customs of the Year video, yeah.
Okay, on his Customs of the Year video for 2024, take a look at that. He's got the Oliphant he did as a Lord of the Rings tribute figure, all with Legion's parts. It's got like the platform and the driver and the banners and everything. It's not a pop and swap. It's not made to do what he did. It was a lot of meticulous customizing. So that's more advanced.
That's when you're getting into, dremeling and cutting and sculpting, and there's a lot of extra to it, but you can definitely do some of that stuff. So I wanted to end on this one because this is the biggest guy that we've got now. But
oh baby.
So that one in the middle there, the brown and gray one, that is also a troll, just like the one that I just showed you. And as big as that boy is that I was just holding, and the My Buddy and all that kind of thing, he's standing in front of what is going to be the dragon that is going to come up for sale later this year, probably the end of first quarter, beginning of second quarter. And you can kind of see a few of the different things there. The one to his left, to my left, his right of the troll is an ogre. That's as a Hazar, which is probably about the same size as a Arag Gore, maybe even a little bit taller with the horns. You've got then a standard horse there, Zende, who is just a 1.0 figure, and then you've got a Goblin figure there. So you can see some of the various different sizes of Legion's parts with that dragon that's just massive. So,
yeah, and they are lined up in front of it. So, the dragon is still even a little bit bigger than it looks in this picture.
Because of perspective, for sure.
Yeah.
So, that pretty much is what we wanted to talk about as far as just the sizes, and I think jokingly what do we say? Does size matter? I think we named this. It's not the size of the legions, but what you do with them that matters. Kind of a little jokey joke, but it really is. Like you can do a lot of things with this stuff. So don't feel like you're stuck in a certain way, but you want to know what kind of parts and what kind of attachments you're dealing with, especially if you're going to buy something from a third-party part company. We started this out by saying that I had a conversation with Len today about this, because if you go on there and it says that you're buying an ogre scale head, like you want to know what that's going to look like and what kind of size scale that you're talking about. Now, you may buy it and you may say, hey, I'm buying this because I want to use it on a 1.0 because I'm creating this really big-headed creature or something, and you can definitely do that. But you want to know when you're buying stuff, like what kind of scale you're working with. So,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was gonna say if you wanna get into some really weird stuff, and I mean that in the best way possible for this creator, go check out Telltale Art Customs.
Oh yeah.
It's our friend Nathaniel Armstrong.
Yep.
He figures out really out of the box ways of putting some of these things together and
Mhm.
doing a lot of different stuff, kind of like what Curtis did with to make the Oliphant out of the troll. Um, I mean, there's a lot of creative people, but I see him in person so much and some of the crazy stuff he does that, he turned an arrow quiver into a beak to get that stork disguise for the Disney Robin Hood,
Mhm.
so have fun with it, be creative, and as far as like custom fit, like all the parts we were talking about, excuse me, official like factory fit stuff we all talked about. But yeah, you like Curtis was saying, you can make stuff fit with some time and effort depending on what you've got, and just make some really cool stuff.
Yeah, and we talk about it on shooting the shelf often, but whether you're, popping and swapping, posing your figures, maybe you just get your figures out every 6 months and you dust them and you put them back in your display and just appreciate them a little bit. Maybe it's doing photography, maybe it's working on dios. Whatever it is that you're doing, that you're having fun with your toys, like that's what this is
Hmm.
about. Like it's about recapturing a small part of your youth. It's about, taking a break from your everyday, stuff that's going on in your life and just have fun for a little bit and be a kid. So when it comes to these customs, maybe you just want to pop and swap. And if so, hopefully the stuff that we talked today about sizes and stuff helps with that. Maybe you do want to get in a little bit more crazy stuff and you want to mess with proportions and kind of mix 2.0 and 1.0 and things like that. And then you go to the next extreme after that, which is like, you know, cutting into parts and shaving things down and dremeling them and making holes bigger so that parts fit where they normally wouldn't fit.
Hmm.
And maybe adding some stuff that you wanted to sculpt extra on top of it. Maybe you got a Arag Gore, but you wanted to give Arag Gore a mullet for some reason, and you just take some green stuff and you make a mullet on Arag Gore. Which if one of you guys doesn't make a mullet on Arag Gore now, I'm gonna be disappointed. But like it just depends on how crazy you want to get with this stuff and what you determine is fun for you.
Yeah,
Don't let it stress you out. There's no expectation that you have to do certain things or whatever. So do whatever that feels good for you, whatever feels right. And if you have any questions, reach out and we'll do our best to help you out.
totally.
Yeah. So anything else that you'd want to add when it comes to kind of playing with these sizes and proportions and stuff?
No, yeah, just have fun, experiment, take your time, be patient, the hot water and or heat gun is definitely your friend. Just be careful. Don't be careful with the heat gun, follow all your typical safety rules. Hot water, don't burn yourself in boiling water. Don't put stuff directly in boiling water. It can be hot.
Mm,
Reach out to the community, reach out to us. There's a lot of people that are very happy to help you with any questions, and um help you figure out what you need to figure out. But yeah, just have fun with
for
it, go
sure.
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if you're popping and swapping stuff, heat is definitely your friend. I've got a video on the channel on using a heat gun and one specifically that I recommended because it's got some varying temperature and stuff. If you're just like pulling one or two pieces off of it, that heat gun works great. If you're going to be doing a ton of pop and swap, like let's say you've got, like Jesse was saying, you just pulled a bunch of figures apart, you got them, like in a pile, and you're kind of mixing and matching stuff. Might be good to have some hot water nearby because you can just drop them in like get a measuring cup, fill it up with some almost boiling water, drop the parts in there, start working on something else, have something to scoop the parts out, and it's just going to work like a charm. And then you can kind of go on and work on something else, so you can kind of keep working on a bunch of things. Whereas with a heat gun, you're kind of like this one part,
Yeah,
this
and
part. So if
if
you're
you're
just doing
using
like one or two things, or like if it's just the spur of the moment, like I'm working on something, I got to pop off something real quick, that heat gun is great. But if you're doing a lot, hot water probably the way to go.
Yeah, and just be careful of joints where you grip and bend stuff. Make sure you warm stuff up, especially if you get your stuff in the cold weather. That little note in all the Legions figures, from Four Horsemen, it's there for a reason. Um, to make sure that you
These
grease
guys are
the
very,
joints essentially.
yeah, these guys are very spiky. And
Oh
you know,
yeah.
some of these have very spiky armor and stuff. So depending on where you grab it, where you're pulling it, how you're trying to, you know, get it to pop off, I've definitely punctured myself quite a few times. So yeah, to Jesse's point, just be careful with what you're doing. Use heat, have fun, and yeah, that's
And
really it.
I'd say always hold on to the joints as close to the articulation point as possible if you're
Yep.
trying to remove. So if you're taking a wrist out, hold it where the wrist is. Don't pull it from the fingers,
Yep.
hold it close, and all that stuff. But yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think I have anything else.
and whether it's something that you're taking out of the package for the first time, maybe it just arrived at your house, in from the cold, whatever. If you start bending something and you get resistance, stop, add heat. No matter what, you know, it could be something that's been in your house for 2 years, and you start feeling resistance, stop, add heat. So
And if you have it apart, heat the hole, not the socket. No, wait, that's the same word. Heat the hole, not the peg.
there you go. The female part,
Yeah.
not the male part. All right. That is all we got, folks. Like I said, if you have questions, have comments, throw them in there or reach out to us directly. Jesse, thank you so much for jumping in. I appreciate it. This
Thanks
has been
for having
awesome.
me.
And until next time, keep creating, folks.